Figured it'd be easier. I hope that's not a disappointment.
No, Eric was just ready to.
Okay, yeah.
This is so fun.
Yeah.
Randomly on this stuff.
Yeah. One of the,
Weird how there are things that are like so precious in this in the field that are like not from.
yeah, like photographs that are stuck together and you're never gonna know what's in the middle. Yeah, it does need to be organized. Parent yourself. I'll mention it to the group as well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, ballpark. Yeah. Yeah, museum event space. It's like 9,000 square feet. It's like yeah, it's narrow. So I mean, it looks like a house from the outside, like a 1921 house, but it goes. The live stream is probably
Hi, I wanted to say hi. I'm Rochelle Anderson. And I just want to remind you of a story. When I first joined the High Holy Day Ensemble, there was this young, lanky, tall kid in high school who sang with the adult ensemble. And here you are. It's been wonderful to see you. And thank you for writing this. This is amazing. Where are you living now?
I'm in Pomona.
Oh, that's not bad. Okay. You weren't always in Southern California, were you?
Yeah.
Just for education, you?
No, I grew up in Cantor.
Right, I know.
And then 12, 14 years ago, I moved out to the Moreno Valley.
Okay.
And then a couple years ago, we moved out to
And like,
I've always been
still SoCal adjacent.
yeah.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. Well, I wasn't in Friedmann, but I watched it. I love listening to you talk about blizzard. And so I went every weekend here to do the beach camp just for fun. I just walked the beach for a couple hours and pick up trucks. It just sort of became a thing, and I do it every weekend with Hannah and Rose Brooke. And so we went this morning, and she told me that her parents knew your grandparents. And so she was kind of giving me that connection, and I love that. And Victory Drug and whatever, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But I love this connectedness. So it's neat to do that too. Super fun. Yeah, good. Well, good. It's good to see you again, and thank
Sean,
you.
you've been here all week. Do you feel like you're being drawn forward?
No, that's all right. It's a.
Good morning, everyone. Come on in. Thank you for being here. Oh, you haven't? You've never read it? Oh, it's worth reading.
Yeah, it's fun.
No, I think this is his copy.
I'm good. See you. Cool glasses. Thank you.
Wait till the event. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Great. 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 Great.
So I went ahead and got
Good morning, Denise.
Jeremy had to go into Boeing this morning, so.
Hi.
Hi there.
Did you get
I just got, I'm in a program, but I just saw it, yes,
All right,
so no problem.
I will be, I really don't know what's happening. This could be in here from 10 to 11 or something?
He's thinking, right, from like 10 to 11:30, and then we're moving into the social hall for the stories program.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
I'm sorry she's not feeling well.
Yeah, so this got real bad last night. For Seder at her sisters, on the way back, she was in such pain.
Terrible.
She's in bed right now. She can't move.
Back pain is the worst. Back and teeth.
Who knows? Thanks for coming. How long is this thing?
This we have plenty of time.
Okay.
So, you know,
Yeah.
we have, an hour-ish, hour plus.
Okay.
So, I think time is
Yeah, I
pretty
didn't.
long,
I mean, it's more informal than my other things. So
I'm sure people will have, just because they
Yeah.
should, if they have like their own personal stories, so they should be able to be part of the
Yeah.
second part of the
I'm looking forward to that. So that's at what time?
Right. We call it for 11:30, but we actually think like immediately following this.
So in it for about an hour. Measure out the day. Okay, cool. Because I'm interested in that too. Oral history is really good, and it's another way to approach this.
I asked Adam, my husband, to record that also. And this is very important. But we'll have the
Very cool.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. Cantor. Well, you all look quite different than the crowd that was just in here. We just had our sanctuary filled with our Torah Center students, kindergarten through 6th grade. You could, or you could just start you could do something. You could make some kind of strange, offhand comment. That was really cute. Cantor Friedmann asked them about history and if they like studying history, and one child said, "I like plants." And Cantor Friedmann said, "Plants have a history." So you handled that well. Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. I know some of you have already joined us throughout the weekend as part of our Lapid Shapiro Scholar in Residence weekend. So if you have already been here and have heard an introduction for Cantor Friedmann, you get to hear it again. Thank you for being here already if you have joined us either on Friday night or yesterday morning. Cantor Friedmann has a wonderful formal bio, which is on the back of the book and in our JJL catalog, etc. But what I'd like to add this morning is that Cantor Friedmann has a great love and passion for Jewish history, and specifically for this community and for Long Beach. And I'm so thrilled when he agreed to help us with the project of writing a book in honor of Temple Israel's 100th birthday. He brings a love of learning, a love of people, and a real just menschlichkeit to his work. And so we're thrilled to welcome you back to Temple Israel, your childhood congregation. As we learned throughout the weekend, Cantor Friedmann not only grew up here, of course, I knew that. He was a teacher at Torah Center, but his parents and grandparents and his great-grandparents, I believe, were all members here at Temple Israel. So what a thrill for us, and I imagine for you and your family, that you are the author of our newest book, added to our collection, Centennial by the Sea, by Cantor Jonathan Friedmann. Welcome.
Thank you. great to still be here. This is a really unique project for me. It's not my first book. It's actually my 31st, but it's the first time I was actually asked to write a book. And it wasn't my idea. It was Sharon's idea. It sort of reminds me of the old Cole Porter comment. When someone asked him what was the inspiration for his songs, he said, "The call from the producer." This is one of those situations for me, although it is a labor of love also. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Someone asked me to do something that I really enjoyed doing, and really in the process of doing, realized it was something I should have been doing as well. So, just thank you, Sharon, for making this happen. And there are many people to thank as well. But I do want to just first tell you a little bit about how I put the book together and why it is what it is and why there are things that aren't in there and that sort of thing. So one longer book that delves into the history of this congregation is by Wally Kelter, co-written with support from Gordon Cohn, who is very instrumental in this process as well. This book is very, it's a very good history, but it's also very, opinionated, as you might imagine. So lessons learned as a local historian, which is where I do most of my work these days. Those kinds of stories are wonderful. I didn't like this person, that person did this, and I didn't like that, and how did they treat me this way? I love those kinds of stories, but that's not this book. That's not the Temple Israel book. I was very careful to avoid those things. So if you're wondering, why didn't I talk about this controversy or that one? Because look, 100 years, there's going to be some controversy. This is a celebration, right? A celebration of the community. It's not sugar-coated. There are, warts and all and so forth, but it's not Wally's book, which I really enjoy and recommend you reading, but it's a different kind of a book. And when you're putting together a book of 100 years of history, including history that you yourself and others have experienced themselves, that's a little bit nerve-wracking, I'm going to be honest. All of you are members of the community. You are a part of the history. All of you have your own experiences. I mentioned this in the acknowledgments in the beginning of the book. It's a daunting task for someone like me, now an outsider to the community, to come in and delve through the material and put together a decade-by-decade chronicle of a history that is still unfolding and presenting it to people who have lived that history. And I didn't want to get anything wrong, but maybe, in your opinion, something might be wrong. And that's okay, because that's the way history is. And in fact, the program that's coming after this one, which I know some of you, maybe most of you, maybe all of you are planning to attend, that's another way of looking at history. So, and again, if you're not familiar with that, it will be more of the oral history side of things, people telling their own personal stories of their own involvement here over the decades and so forth. That's another way of putting together a 100-year history, actually. This could have been an oral history project. That could still happen. But anyway, that would be kind of a parallel to this. The intention with this book specifically was to make it short, make it readable, make it digestible, include key photographs that I was able to find, make it user-friendly, not daunting. I've already spoken to a few people who've read the whole thing already. It doesn't take a long time, and that was by design. So part of that, again, was being very selective and not including every little detail. If there is an event or some significant thing that happens or a significant person, I could only devote a couple of paragraphs to that thing or person. So again, it's not a comprehensive history, but it's a kind of a blow-by-blow 100-year chronicle, if you want to think of it that way. So as I mentioned, everyone is a historical figure. I know we don't like to think of ourselves that way, but we're all a part of history. History is a story of people, of places, and we can look in the past and think that's history and this is not history, what's happening today, but this is a part of history as well. So the point of all of that is this is an ongoing story. It's a story that even precedes what I was able to put in the book, because we didn't talk about how the first Jewish pioneers who came to Long Beach, how they got here, what their family was like back in Europe. And I mean, you could go backwards in time and find more stories. You could, again, move forward in time and realize that you're a part of the story as well. But I do want to acknowledge many helpers in the process of putting the book together. I already mentioned Sharon, who I think, I will take the blame for any inaccuracies in the book, but it's really, I think, your book too, So I mention that only because I know you all have her phone number and email. If you have any issues with the book, please direct them to Sharon. Charmaine, of course, who has been here longer than anyone, she was very helpful. And not only because she has the institutional knowledge and the relationships that she's built with so many people over the years, and access to materials, but because she's a real stickler, and she was very helpful in correcting some things in the book as well. And she doesn't, take gruff from anyone. So that was actually very instructive and helpful for me as well. I mentioned Gordon Cohn, who not only put this book together, but did some earlier kind of testimonial historical notes on the congregation over the years. Harriet Ellis, we need to mention, of blessed memory. Kelly also, Cantor Kelly. Something happened along the way, which was essential for this book. Early on in the process, I was really scrambling to find materials. I was getting a little bit nervous, especially with more like stuff that happened over the past 40 years. The earlier part of the history was easier to find. That might sound counterintuitive, but for instance, the very helpful website, newspapers.com, which is under the ancestry.com umbrella. They chronicle and record and preserve newspaper records from the 19th to about 2000 or so. And you can go in there and find basically anything that was ever printed in the Long Beach Press Telegram, et cetera. So there's a lot on Temple Israel, as you can imagine, in there. In my own archives, I'm the president of the Western States Jewish Historical Society, Association, actually. I don't know why I call it society. The Western States Jewish History Association. We actually have a little bit on Long Beach as well, particularly in the earthquake of 1933 and so forth. But again, I was getting a little bit nervous because I didn't have access to enough material. So Kelly and she arranged for us to go visit Harriet. Really, it turned out just a few months before her passing. And she told us about this archive, which for some reason we didn't know about, which was in a cabinet on, in one of the classrooms upstairs. And there was a bunch of stuff in there, about 8 or 9 banker's box full of stuff, as I came to learn it, as I was putting stuff into it. All disheveled, no rhyme or reason, just whatever people thought was interesting they threw in there. So some very important things, some very interesting things, and everything in between. I think the next phase of this project will probably be archiving that stuff in a more appropriate and professional manner. But nevertheless, that stuff, which is taking up most of my office now at home and has been for several months, and I do want to get rid of it. Not get rid of it, return it in an appropriate fashion. All I mean is I need space. That being said, without Harriet and her also, the preliminary history that she did, which is on the website for the temple. Really this book wouldn't have happened without her. And we were hoping that she would be here today to celebrate her 100th anniversary alongside the congregation's 100th anniversary, as it were. She was 99 when she passed away. And I shouldn't say passed away. Do you know why I shouldn't say passed away? Because Rabbi Cantor didn't like it. He said, don't say passed away. That is a silly metaphor. People die. So we have to become comfortable with that. That's actually one of the main lessons I learned from Rabbi Cantor. Okay. But yes, Harriet was very important as well. Another thing I didn't have immediate access to were some of the best photographs, which are on the wall over there in the Hall of Generations, I believe it's called. So if you haven't looked at the timeline and the wonderful, very nicely selected images and materials documents that are on the wall, check it out. It's the other, like the shorthand of the history as well. Okay, so I thought since you have the book, I don't have to read it to you necessarily, although maybe selections, which I found to be most surprising. But I do want to share just some items that I found along the way, show and tell, if you will. Some things that are just wonderful that somebody thought to preserve them. So for instance, this is a photocopy of the souvenir program from the Jewish Community Building Fund on New Year's Eve, 1921. This was the first year of the congregation. So somebody decided I don't know where the original copy is, but to photocopy it and put it in that cabinet upstairs, and there it was. I should say that the original building on 439 West Anaheim Street is still there in its original form. You can drive by, it looks the same. I've been told as well that the stained glass, the circular stained glass that's over by the restroom at the end of the building on the downstairs, that was taken from that building. And you can see on the building today, there is like the place where that stained glass used to be. It's now just a circle. The one thing that I learned this morning, as it happens, is that property apparently is for sale. And it looks to be vacant. There's some interior images if you want to look it up on your local internet. You can find these images. But it's on sale, and in the description, the person who owns it is hoping that the buyer will develop it into affordable housing, a 5-story complex, meaning that this building, this very historic foundational first Jewish site in Long Beach, will be no more. And this is the pitch. I have no vested interest, but it's just an idea I had driving in this morning. The property isn't that expensive, in the scheme of things. A little over $1 million, which, for an individual might be a lot, but for a community, a foundation, that kind of thing, reasonable. Wouldn't it be wonderful to get the Jewish community to buy that property, to turn it into a proper museum and event venue, and preserve that history, right? And have like a Jewish museum of Long Beach. Anybody like? Yeah, look, I'm just asking questions. Wouldn't it be nice? I think it would, and it would be a shame, even though affordable housing is very much needed, and we know that we could do that maybe somewhere else, right? We can preserve this historic building. But some of the nice things in this souvenir program, just want to note on the topic of the history that even precedes the foundation of the Jewish community proper in Long Beach. It says 10 years ago, less than half a dozen, and this is 10 years ago from 1921, less than half a dozen Jewish families were located here, and of these, none knew of the existence of the others. Gradually, very gradually, others came, saw, and settled. Long Beach is but a little spot on the earth's surface, albeit a wonderfully beautiful spot. And as in all spots, big or little, the Jews gravitated towards each other. And when came the high holidays, there was a yearning for a place in which we might gather to hold divine services, at least on these days, which epitomized the faith and the history of the Jews. And so the first religious services were conducted in ultra-Orthodox fashion. I'm not sure exactly what that term means in this context. At Riviera Hall, at Broadway and Chestnut in 1913, etc. So, a surprise find like this tells us a bit about even the history that precedes the 100-year history of the congregation. Another really startling thing I found was from the Press Telegram on Friday, July 3rd, 1931. This is a notice, where to go tonight, Friday night. It has a notice for the band concert, municipal bandstand, a couple of Masonic Lodge type things, of course, the Scottish Rite as well, Temple Israel services and fellowship, and Sinai Temple, which was active at that time as well, on 9th and Olive. And oh, look at this, Ku Klux Klan at the Oddfellows Hall, right there in the newspaper. Your options for Friday night. You could go to a Jewish service or a Klan meeting. What was really surprising about that, when you look at the history of Long Beach in the 1920s and 30s, is how much of a presence the Klan had here, how open it was. They had offices on Anaheim Street as well, about a mile and a half from the Jewish Community Center. The brazenness in which the Klan sort of asserted its presence in this town is startling, especially when we think of Long Beach today and how diverse it is and how welcoming it is to all kinds of communities. It wasn't always that way. And so when you look at the history of Temple Israel, you actually see the history of an evolution of a community within a diversifying city as well, and how the community itself reflects the diversity of the city. I was reading the 2022 report from Brandeis University, the demographic study of Long Beach, which you can find on the internet as well. And it said something to the effect of 34% of Jewish households with children in the greater Long Beach area have kids who are biracial, which again, we've come a long way, not only as a Jewish community, but as a community of Long Beach just generally. And again, how diverse it is. The motto for the city is the international city, as you probably know. And I think that was probably aspirational in the beginning when there was a port and all of the hopes to kind of bring in commerce and so forth. Now it really is an international city. And by some estimates, it is the most diverse city in the country. That's debated because everybody wants to be the most diverse. Or not everybody. Those who want to be diverse want to be the most diverse, I should state. But nevertheless, just a little factoid. So, here's something. I found this in the stacks. This is a 10th anniversary sermon that was given by Rabbi Harvey Franklin, who was the rabbi in the 1930s, from 1934. And this is on cue cards that he would, he typed them out and had them to read very, 1930s style from the from the Bema. Some of what he said was quite, present tense, meaning things haven't changed that much. He said, I realize that attendance is handicapped by the movies, radio, and social functions, but we must rededicate ourselves to service for our people and for humanity. So those who complain about, there's so many other things we could do on Friday night and so forth, that was true 90 years ago also, and that will probably always be true. A more kind of poignant aspect of this speech that he gave, again, this is 1934. So it's roughly a year before the passage of the Nuremberg laws, but things are definitely becoming apparent to those who are aware in terms of what is going on in Europe. And he said this: "Hell knows no torture to which our co-religionists in Germany are not subjected. The deadly poison is spreading. It is a challenge to humanity. We are our brothers' keepers. The battle for them is raging. We hear the call. Each of us must join the ranks and wholeheartedly fight for them under our commander-in-chief, the Lord our God, source of our salvation." So this is very early warning, call. Franklin happened to be in the know. Not everybody was. But he was aware of what was brewing and what was possible in Germany, even in 1934. So that was another aspect of that. One of the interesting things, too, that I discovered is this is from the New Temple Supper Dance from June 9th, 1940, when they were raising money to move here. If you know about the history of why we moved here, first of all, like I mentioned, the building on Anaheim Street, it's not that big. And Franklin himself, when he talked about arriving in Long Beach in 1928, he said everything that was Jewish in Long Beach was happening at that building, including athletics. And there was, in the kitchen, not only pots and pans, but punching bags and other athletic gear hanging from the ceiling. And it was like a real multi-purpose building. He even talked about how they would clear out the ark and all the accoutrement for the service and put a boxing ring right there in the middle of the sanctuary for prize fighting. So that was the situation of Jewish Long Beach back in the 20s and early 30s. And then there was that earthquake, right? The great earthquake, great meaning big, of 1933, the Long Beach earthquake, which did significant damage to the building, the Jewish community building. And at that time, there was a debate in the community. Should we stay there? Should we find somewhere else? This isn't, the best location anymore. Jews are moving. This always happens in cities as well, moving to different parts of the city. And so, talks began to move here eventually. And what I find to be kind of amusing, or just a byproduct of history, is this is what, I don't know if you can see this. I should have had slides, but I don't. But this is what the Temple Israel building, the original building here, was supposed to look like. Very grand, very large, a very tall building, really modeled, I would say, on Wilshire Boulevard Temple, even though the architect was adamant that it wasn't. But even, Rabbi Edgar Magnin of Wilshire Boulevard Temple was very instrumental in the founding of this temple and getting support and funding. And, it's basically a replica. But nevertheless, it ended up not being this tall and this kind of austere. It ended up being what some of us remember, right? And now it's something completely different. In fact, it's on the cover of the book if you need a memory, a reminder. But here's another thing I learned about the founding of the congregation itself, or I shouldn't say the founding of the congregation, the beginning of this building. So this is on, if you have your book, on page 25. It's the beginning of the chapter that says 1940s new building. The construction permit granted on May 28, 1940, was not without opposition. A neighborhood resident presented the city council with an appeal backed by 32 property owners. One after another, these protesters were heard, the press telegram noted, each denying that his protest was based on the fact the proposed church would house a Jewish congregation. Opponents objected that the congregation would be built in a residential zone without a designated parking lot, which is still a problem. A less polished resident revealed she was against the construction of a Jewish church. Councilman Carl Fletcher responded that Long Beach was known as a city of churches. Councilman William Branton went a step further, stating that a large share of the protest was based on prejudice. So, something we forget today, something we like to forget today. But part of the opposition to the building of this structure back in, which culminated in 1941, was anti-Semitism. And again, as much as we aspire and maybe paint a rosy picture of the past, actually, I'll say this is true for Western states, Jewish history, people in general. We like to think of the West as less anti-Semitic than the East Coast or Europe and so forth. And that is true. The outward, violent expression of anti-Semitism does tend to be less prominent in the American West than elsewhere. But it's not there, if that makes sense. Right, and we certainly see evidence of this as we look back in our history here. So I don't want to make this all doom and gloom.
Can't we also talk about the quote on the...
Oh, yes. So thank you. So the quote being, I'll misquote it, but this shall be a house of worship for all peoples. That, yeah, which is still out there? Yes. That was very intentional. Thank you for reminding me. So part of the early efforts of the temple at this location was to outreach to non-Jewish residents in the community, non-Jewish houses of worship, putting together interreligious activities with different faith leaders in the community and so forth, really to kind of solve this problem, which was, what are these Jews doing in this neighborhood, right? And opening the doors. In the early days of when they first opened this building, they would have like show and tell, invite people in to show them around the building, to basically show that Jews aren't like that different, right? We sort of engage in the same sorts of things that you do, and we're neighbors and we want this harmony. And Rabbi Franklin was very adamant about that. So when you look at the history of sort of interreligious, interfaith cooperation in the city, I think Long Beach really owes a debt of gratitude to Temple Israel specifically. I believe it began with Temple Israel and the activities around this issue of trying to basically say that we belong here, that sort of set in motion whatever similar activities are still going on today. Yeah.
I just want to say something about that. When we were rebuilding the building, we weren't actually going to put that back on. The neighbor who lived here sent us pictures of what had been on the building and said, we hope you put that back on the building.
Oh, nice.
That's why that frame is up there.
Oh, that's perfect.
Could you repeat the comment, please?
Yes, so there was someone local, a neighbor, who wanted to remind the architects who were putting the new building together here, that we're in right now, that was the motto that was on the front of the building, and that was very important and very valuable in the community, and that they wished and hoped that would remain. So apparently it wasn't in the original plan, but because of this, it is now still here, which is great. Let's see. I do want to have time for Q&A, and I don't know how much time we have, but I do have a few other little things to share as well. One of the, going back to the 30s, one of the interesting things, of course, is the Great Depression, which is another one of those things we like to forget about, but it had an impact everywhere, including here at, or there, as it were, at the old Temple Israel site. And Rabbi Franklin, who was a very worldly, educated, sophisticated guy who had some independent means, he struck a few deals with the community because they weren't able to pay his salary for much of the 30s. And this included, he would like carry around uncashed checks in his pocket and just wait till he was absolutely certain that he could go to the bank with them. And he was very conscientious about that. And also, they allowed him, or kind of encouraged him, the board, to take some time off, unpaid vacation time. And he went around the world in the 30s just noting certain things that were going on. Of course, again, what we now call the Holocaust was brewing at that time. And one of the interesting things that he did was he went to different European cities to see how the Jews were being treated and that sort of thing. But he also went to Palestine, pre-state Israel. And this is on page 2021, again, if you're following along. But Rabbi Franklin devoted the summer of 1934 to gathering firsthand accounts of the struggles of German Jewish refugees in France, Spain, and Palestine. He shared these stories in an October 1934 article, "I Have Seen the Refugees," published in the Miami-based Jewish Unity, which I should have brought. I have the article. Nevertheless, Franklin was pleased with the welcome refugees received in France and Spain, despite the economic downturn and some suspicion on the part of natives. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Palestine, then under British control, was the most hospitable destination. Palestine is absorbing its Jewish population splendidly, Franklin wrote. Most of the German Jews are adapting themselves to their new home. It will take time naturally to work this out perfectly. Fortunately, Palestine knows no depression. Business is excellent. Buildings are being erected everywhere. The future is bright. By all means, the national homeland is the best place for our oppressed brethren to go. Only a limited number can enter Palestine, however, which makes provisions elsewhere imperative. So just another observation on the ground of what was going on. And this idea that, from his perspective, the depression was not, present, not an obvious force in Palestine at that time, which was growing, and there was an influx of refugees and so forth. It's just another interesting tidbit from history. One of my favorite stories involves Wally Kelter. Of course, we could fill a book with fun Wally Kelter stories, and that has been done. But there's this great story about, and this is his perspective, right? So, grain of salt, that sort of thing. But shortly after arriving in Long Beach, this is on page 39, Kelter received a phone call telling him that his interview had been pushed back to 8:30 p.m. When he asked why it was so late, he was told there was another interview scheduled for 7:30 p.m. "You need not pick me up," he fumed. "Rabbis are not like maids. They are not interviewed in this manner. I am no longer interested." He eventually agreed to an interview with the board, which turned out to be a gathering of 70 people in the social hall. David Fuhrer, head of the search committee, gave a cold introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have here Rabbi Kelter. I do not know anything about him except that he is as bald as I am and that he is available." Kelter replied, "I want to correct the chairman with no apologies, because when he said I am available, he really was exaggerating. I will be available to a congregation that knows how to treat a rabbi." And thus the Kelter era began. So I think when you look at the book, and particularly those years, the 50s and 60s, when, not only was Kelter just a major force, as you know, in the city, and particularly here at the congregation, but he was, both kind of old world, old-fashioned. He had very refined musical tastes and all of that. But he was also very forward-looking in his vision of Judaism. I remember when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s here at Temple Israel, he was still kind of lurking around the halls and overseeing things as he did. And I was terrified of him. This old German guy, I didn't understand who he was or why he was or any of that stuff. But later in life, and what would be like the last years of his life, I used to come here for Saturday morning services, which, as you know, if there isn't a B'nai Mitzvah thing going on, not a lot of people here. So I got to know him, just we were among the few people gathered here. And I would drive him home to Bixby Towers, and we'd get, pie at Polly's Pies and all that kind of stuff. And I actually learned a lot about him. He was funny. He was charming. He was very warm. I didn't know that, because even my mother told me that she was terrified of him as well growing up. And I only bring that up because when we look at the history and all the personalities in here, I tried to, within limits, within the limitation of a short book, try to capture some elements of the personalities that are discussed in the book. It's just the surface, not even the surface, right? What can you do in a couple paragraphs to summarize a person's life and characteristics? But I think, and I hope that some of that will come through in the stories like I just told, when we're talking about Cantor and Franklin and others, who were, they were personalities. And I think that's the great thing about looking at a history of a place that's been around for 100 years. It's not just the place, it's not just the gala events and we raise money to do this and we burn the mortgage and, there are all these parties that would happen over the years. But it's really the story of people, right? And it's not just the leaders, and certainly the leaders are important, but it's the history of everyone. And again, I say this in part, to defend myself, because all of you should have been mentioned if I could have, right? Some names that are important, I'm sure, and I know are not in there. And I don't know everything about the history of Temple Israel, and I don't think any one person does. In some sense, this is a culmination of a project, but it might be the beginning of a project as well. Because again, the oral history part is another way to approach it, and we'll engage with that shortly. What time is it? Soon. And it's an ongoing, unfolding history. And I think, all of us should be proud that this congregation has lasted as long as it has. It's unusual, I will tell you. And that the future is also bright. And I love those pins that people are wearing that say the next 100 years. It may sound far-fetched, but is it? It's up to you, right? You will determine if it's far-fetched or not. I guess I'm making a pitch now for something. But the point is that, not only can we, look back in 50 years and write a 150-year book and that kind of thing, but you are all a part of it. That's the main thing. I think it was you, Mark, actually, in something I quoted you in the book, by the way, where you were saying, as president, sort of looking back at your own history in the congregation, that you keep coming back to the relationships. I don't know if this sounds familiar. And the people. It's all about the people, right? A place is a place. It's a building. It's a container. A synagogue is a gathering place for Jewish people. It's a beautiful gathering place, but it's just a place. It's a building. It is the individuals, and I'm riffing off what you said there, that makes this a valuable and sustainable place. So really it's something, this is a book that is not only for you, but it is by you, right? And it is a part of, or it's a testament, a celebration, like I said, to your longevity here and your commitment and all of that. And I'm just honored and humbled to have played a role in chronicling this as best as I could. So thank you.
I think we have some time for questions or comments if anyone.
See a hand up over there? Okay, perfect.
I just have a comment and then a question. The comment is Harriet Ellis was actually leading an archive committee.
Yeah.
She had 3 people on her committee, and things were kind of moving, and we had in our budget to maybe hire somebody, and then the pandemic hit and everything kind of fell
Ah,
apart.
is that what
So
happened?
things were kind of moving a little bit, and
To that point, I think you have more to say, but I did find in the archives themselves, if we can call them that, the collection of materials, the Geniza, there were actually documents recording that, things that she had printed about how to create an archive and that kind of thing. So I could tell that there was something brewing and it didn't happen.
someone on our committee's here.
Ah, wonderful. Wow. Yeah. Yes, yes. So the comment was that the archives were in the process of being organized and collected when the pandemic hit, and as a result, it just sort of stayed in the disheveled state that I found it. And there was a committee and the people who were committed for a couple of years to do this work, and it maybe can still happen. I think it needs to happen. Let's get the band back together.
My question though
Yeah.
is, you talked about there's nothing about the history of Jews coming to Long Beach prior to that. Is there a resource that we
Yeah.
wanted to know about that? We could.
Yes, there is a, again, very kind of cursory book that was published. I should have, yes, repeating it. Is there a history of the Jews in Long Beach before Temple Israel? And yes, there is, and I should have brought it. And I think I have it as a PDF as well. It was published, I think, in the 40s, maybe the 30s. It's, very sort of surface level, talking about the broader Jewish community, of which, of course, Temple Israel plays a part. But it does talk about some of the early people who came at the turn of last century and so forth. Of course, it's not the complete history, but there is some broader picture that one can glean from reading that. And we could probably make that available, because it was made available to me by somebody sent it. Was it Jerry? I think so. But nevertheless, yeah.
I wonder, Jonathan, first of all, I want to compliment the number of past presidents we have in our midst today. It's more than
Yes.
a half dozen in this sanctuary at the moment, and yay for them for expanding on our history and making it what it is up to now. The other thing is, I wonder, is there any kind of calculation of how many of our students here over all these years have gone on to become rabbis, cantors, Jewish communal workers? Anything on that? I know there are a number of them.
I guess I'm one of them. Yeah. I was thinking about that too.
I mean,
I'm not
I
sure.
have some sense of it, but there's not a formal list, but we could maybe put our heads
Half a
together.
dozen, I don't know, something like that comes to mind.
Yeah, to my mind, probably 6, 8, something like that.
Yeah. But,
good
and
question.
by the way, to your point, the question or the comment that you made about the longevity of commitment from past presidents, that is no small thing. I mean, the fact that someone will serve as president and then want to continue being associated with that organization, that is not a given at all. Yeah, please rise if you are a past president. Amazing. And most of you look kind of happy. So, yeah, no, but it is really a remarkable thing. And one of the nice things, and I wasn't able to really delve into it because the list was actually too long. But one of the things that Charmaine sent me, I think by request from Sharon, was a list of longtime members, people who grew up here in the 40s who are still active. I mean, it's really remarkable, decades and decades of commitment to this community, which again, that's the reason why Temple Israel is still standing. And it's also very unusual when you look at the history of Jews. And, there's always that joke of, you've probably heard this one. It's not even that funny. But you find a Jew on a desert island, and he has 2 congregations, and he built two synagogues. And he's asked, why do you have 2 synagogues? You're just one guy on this island. He's like, oh, that's the one I don't go to. But I mean, that's kind of true, right? The idea that you're committed to a place and a community for so long is really the most significant thing that I learned about Temple Israel, if I'm being honest. The fact that this commitment goes so deep and through generations, it's remarkable. It really is.
Jonathan.
Yes.
You grew up here, and I remember when you were a young child in the same class as my daughter. And then you had mentioned that your parents, of course, I remember them with the young little children and the horses and da-da-da-da, you know, and the cello. What was I going to say? Oh, and you said that your grandparents were also members. Can you tell us a little bit about their history? It would be nice to know since you're here.
Oh,
and
sure.
You're the third generation.
Yeah, it is
Or
remarkable.
fourth?
Yes, so the question is, who were my grandparents? I mean, I didn't actually know my grandfather. He passed away, or died, I should say. Sorry, Rabbi Cantor. He died either when I was, I can't remember if he was living when I was even a baby. But I did know my grandmother. She died when I was 9 or 10. But they were, part of the pioneer community in Bellflower. And if you've ever been out there and you see maybe still standing, I haven't been out there in a while, Victory Drugs, that was my grandfather's drugstore. It's an In-N-Out burger now, which is terrible. Darn it. I didn't want to hear that. Well, I'll pretend like I didn't hear that. So Victory Drugs, that was a part of the family history. Okay, somebody moved it. Okay, thank you. Anyway, what was I saying? So yes, they were involved in, the 40s, 50s, that era. I don't know the extent of the history, but also my great-grandmother was part of the community as well. I remember going to her 100th birthday when I was very young, and it was very weird to be standing in front of Yoda, That was my recollection. But yes, long history, and my siblings and I all went through the school here. And in high school, I joined the choir in my senior year of high school. This is not what you asked, but I always find it to be an interesting story, or again, interesting to me because it's my story. But, Cantor Kelly mentioned that she was a student of mine at the Academy for Jewish Religion. And, we always ask each other, or, people ask us, why did you become a Cantor? This isn't going to sound great, but the reason why I became a Cantor was because of boredom. Because, high holidays for a young person back at the Carpenter Center and all of that. Hard to stay awake, hard to stay focused. I didn't have a great attention span anyway. So I figured if I joined the choir, maybe I would be more engaged in this process, right? Maybe I'd be an active participant. And I would have a list of all the music for the service, and I could mentally kind of check the boxes and know when it's going to end and that kind of thing. And one thing led to another, and I was really inspired by Marvin Finley, Cantor Marvin Finley. He was sort of my... I admired much about him as a cantor, not only his voice and the way that he was able to lead the choir and his perfect pitch and everything like that, but the thing that I really liked about him, this isn't going to sound great either, was that after Friday night services, he would just leave. He didn't go to the Oneg. And I thought, oh my gosh, imagine being a cantor who doesn't have to go to the Oneg and can just kind of leave after the service. That was amazing. So that's really what inspired me to become a cantor. Not what you asked, but that's a bit of the family history, if that makes sense.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
I was teaching.
I feel obligated, yes. Yeah.
I was teaching at the Tourist Center in 1970, and we did have a parking lot. The parking lot was sold to that house next door, where they have a sign that we're 100 years old, but they're not. They bought it in 1970, I think it was. But Volley wanted to move the temple to where there was a special vacant lot by the Jewish Community Center. No, the congregation wanted to. And he didn't want it. He wanted the temple to stay here, even if we didn't have a parking lot.
Yeah.
I just say that debate continued, right, for those of us that were around in the first decade of this millennium. Right?
Yes.
The 2000s, that was a big debate also, to move or to remodel.
Yeah, and it is, I'll say from, again, someone who was engaged in this community for my youth and then taught here. When I first came here, Rabbi Moskowitz actually gave me like a sneak peek before the building opened. And I'm now starting to see some similarities between the old building and this one. If you look hard enough, you'll see the stained glass over here and things that are kind of preserved. If you walk up the stairs to the classrooms, that still looks pretty much the same, actually. But it was pretty jarring. And I think this is probably an experience that was felt, maybe still, by some of us. Of course, it's a much improved building, and it's beautiful, and I'm not saying anything against the location and the reorientation of the sanctuary, and all that stuff is great. But it does feel like a different building in a lot of ways. And, I asked the kids this morning, all of whom are too young to have known the original building. And they actually asked us, what did it used to look like? So, we are mentors, and we are, again, containers of history ourselves. I know that there is a program that links young ones with old ones, as it were. Those kinds of stories just about the congregation. One way to get the future generation engaged in history, which is not natural, I can tell you as someone who runs a historical society, most of the people who are interested in that are historical figures themselves, as we like to say. But I think there is a way to even connect the young ones to their own history in this place. Because, it wasn't that long ago that this was a very different building, and that's an interesting entry point for a lot of these kids, I discovered this morning, to just talk about what the building used to look like. Yeah, exactly. I know. I did talk a little bit about that with the kids too, that I used to sit in the back row, which is here, and I had no idea that the rabbi could hear everything I was saying because of the dome. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that going on. Mysterious voices.
So you mentioned earlier that Long Beach is an international city, and 3 years ago, the New York Times put one of their graphics on showing precinct by precinct the makeup of a city. And many cities are diverse in segments.
Right.
Whereas Long Beach, if you looked at that, we are diverse block by block. It was very impressive, and I couldn't find another city in the country that looked anything like us.
Yeah, that's a great point. The idea that kind of, I think because, if we're looking at it historically, because Long Beach has been a destination, right? Of course, natives, and, we could talk about that history, which is not always very pleasant to do. But if you're talking about the migration patterns and how the city was basically formed by people who got here and decided to build a house or have a farm or whatever they ended up doing, there wasn't that kind of burrowed or siloed kind of, this community lives over here. I mean, maybe Signal Hill, if you look at the history of that place and the activities there. But they kind of broke off from Long Beach in response to some of the integration that was kind of natural in the environment. That's a great point. Yeah.
Hold on, Nana. No. Just because we're recording it, we'll get your voice.
Can you tell me about Rabbi Franklin? Did he write any memoirs about his time here in Long Beach and reflecting more on his trip in 1934 because it was so prescient what he was doing? And I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know when Franklin left.
Yeah.
And then the successes. I do know one of my favorite stories that Herman Alevy used to tell me about the High Holy Days is they were so bored, they would go outside, and I think it was when we were at First Congregational Church, he and Bob Caller would go around and have a smoke, and then they would put quarters in the parking meters so people wouldn't get tickets while they were inside. But that was one of my favorite stories of Herman's. But I'm interested in Rabbi Franklin.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
first of all, that's a wonderful story about, first of all, doing something naughty, smoking cigarettes on Holy Day. It's a shanda. And then also making up for it by preserving the parking. Yeah, I mean, that's a terrific story. So Franklin, I was able to find in my own association's archives a few very short essays, kind of reflective things that he talked about, again, kind of coming to Long Beach and what the state of Long Beach was like, and how he was able to persevere through the not only the Depression, but the earthquake and some of that. He had a very long presence in Long Beach, as you'll see in the book. He left after 10 years and then came back in the 40s to be rabbi again, and also developed the adult education programs for the Long Beach Unified School District. So he became an expert in teaching adults skills and so forth, and a pioneer in that field. But there's a lot of fun little stories that he talks about in his memoir. If I can remember this one, and I think it's in the book as well, he would notice that transients would come to the Anaheim Street building looking for handouts, right? And they would all profess to be Jews because they thought maybe that's what they needed to say if they wanted to get something from Temple Israel, which was establishing itself as a social conscious, really social justice organization, even back in the 20s and 30s. But he said, he became suspicious. So one time, someone asked for something, and he said, "Oh yeah, you're Jewish, huh? What's Pesach?" And the person said, "Oh, I know, that's Mexican money." So there are little stories like that. Franklin was a character.
We have time for one more question if there's another one. Okay. Jonathan, these are my parents, Bruce and Susie Amster. Just in case
Wonderful.
Put that together.
You mentioned in your presentation that the early services were very Orthodox.
Yeah.
Could you just talk a little bit about how Temple Israel developed as far as a Reformed congregation and part of the Union?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the beginnings, I'm restating it. In terms of the beginnings of Temple Israel, or really the Jewish community being largely Orthodox, or what we would call today Orthodox, traditionalist, as it were, at the time of the founding of Temple Israel, there were, anywhere between 125 and 150 Jewish families in the Long Beach area in the early 20s, enough to begin a community. However, most of those Jews were what we would call traditionalist. And this is true in many places in the West in particular. When you're looking at kind of pioneer Jewish communities in the outlying regions, as Long Beach was in those days, there was often the majority of people who wanted there to be a synagogue would be, of course, the more observant, right? They're the ones who you would expect to want this kind of thing. And yet the people with money tended to be those who were more established. That is, the people of German, background, the kind of, acculturated Jews. So there was often a conflict between those who really wanted the community and those who could make the community happen. So there was an attempt to compromise around this. The majority of the board members of the original Jewish community building were of means, and therefore more of the kind of Central European pedigree, as it were. They quickly kind of took over things in the sense of, if we're paying for this, if we're making this happen, it's going to be reform. It's going to reflect our desires, our culture, as it were. But then they knew that if they were going to be a community, they would have to at least pay some kind of lip service or a little bit more to that Orthodox community. So this is going to sound funny, but one of the things they decided was to make kippot optional at the services. And this would somehow, tame all of the tensions and anger that was coming from the Orthodox group. If we allow them to wear kippot, then maybe they'll be happy. Of course, that didn't work. So very quickly after Temple Israel was formed, Temple Sinai was also formed as the more Orthodox or conservadox or whatever we would call it. So again, the history is kind of repeated in the sense of who was really clamoring for a community and who could actually make it happen. And we certainly saw that in the Long Beach community as well.
I don't know about any of you, but I feel kind of overcome by emotion as I think about the grand history and on the shoulders upon which we stand. Cantor, thank you so much for helping us to commemorate this incredible milestone for our community. In February, when we celebrated the 100th birthday, just to go on a little bit about your idea of teaching our children, we did have a family learning day, and I know a few of you were here as grandparents or as teachers, where I set up the whole social hall as like a museum, and I had a lot of these artifacts and many others set up. We had maybe 25 or 30 artifacts. I created a quiz and a search, so students and their parents went around the room looking for the answers and picking up these artifacts and looking for the right information to answer the questions on the quiz. And it was a really special way of interacting with the history, and I know that there's a lot more to come. I want to remind everyone, if you have not yet picked up your book, your copy of the book, that we have one for every family of the congregation, and that is with special thanks to our Temple Israel Foundation, who allowed us to do a printing that size, and we're so grateful to the foundation for that gift and for your ongoing support of everything we're doing at the temple, which is just a small pitch to say that if you have not yet considered a contribution to our next 100-year campaign, it's not too late. But soon it will be too late because the campaign is coming to an end. So we invite you to make a gift in honor of our 100th birthday. And at this point, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. People can use the restroom and visit with each other. I know Cantor Friedmann is willing to sign some books. And then we'll join together in the social hall for the continuation of our Temple Israel Stories program. Please stay for that. Hear one another's stories. We're going to be recording them. And even if you're not on our list of speakers and would like to share a story, we hope to have a few minutes to do that, and the program will be facilitated by past president and ongoing volunteer Amy Lapellis. So again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Cantor Friedmann.
Yeah. Thank you. I got to get down to that basement. Yeah. I didn't even know there was a basement. It's kind of like, Pee-wee's Big Adventure when he goes to the Alamo and he asks for it's like, where's the basement of Temple Israel?
All the material that is non-silica